This week on Forward.
We can use spiritual concepts, precepts, ancient faith-based wisdom to help humanity mature and move forward on a species level, on a societal level. We can have a spiritual revolution.
Let's say you had this $1 trillion foundation and it said, okay, anyone who's doing any of these things, paint a mural, teach art to the kids, we're going to give you Soul Boom Bucks. First, they wouldn't believe it. But then they would say, wait a minute, I can actually make Soul Boom Bucks?
You're realizing there's going to be a lot of jokes at this point in the podcast about Shrute Bucks.
Bring back Shrute Bucks.
Yeah.
It is my distinct pleasure and privilege to welcome to the podcast best-selling author of Soul Boom, Why We Need a Spiritual Revolution, which we'll talk about. You probably know him from The Office, but he's also the host of The Geography of Bliss, now on Peacock, and also of the upcoming Soul Boom podcast, the one and only Rainn Wilson. Welcome, Rainn.
Andrew Yang.
Yes.
We finally made it happen. Here we are together at last, making podcast history.
Yes.
The most unlikely duo. Like, if you can imagine two random Americans sitting on couches, it would be Andrew Yang and Rainn Wilson.
Yes, the convo you didn't know you needed is finally here. I'm so glad to have this convo with you because I enjoyed your book immensely.
Oh, thanks, man.
I highly recommend Soul Boom to anyone who just wants to understand the world a little bit better, or maybe is a little unhappy. I'd say, because that's one of the themes of the book. But this wasn't your first book. You'd written a memoir recently.
Yeah.
And I got the sense that you wrote this book in part because you were concerned about the mental health struggles of young people in particular.
Yeah. I talk about, early on in the book, I have a chapter called A Plethora of Pandemics. And I talk about all of the kind of problems and broken systems that humanity is facing. And I really admire the work that you do because you're trying to address them systematically and taking kind of a 20,000 mile view down on planet Earth and like, how can we reinvent these systems? I'm doing the same thing more through a spiritual lens than a kind of a political lens, but mental health, climate change, racism, income inequality, there's so many issues plaguing our species right now, but the mental health epidemic is one that's near and dear to my heart. I talk to a lot of young people. Obviously, a lot of young people are fans of The Office. I go around to a lot of college campuses. I speak there, and I'm very forthright about, the mental health issues that I had back, because I'm so old. When I had them, it was the 90s, and people didn't really understand things like that as a mental health issue. If you were having anxiety attacks or panic attacks, if you were having depression, if you were having alienation, addiction, this was just kind of like stuff you just had to work out on your own. There wasn't really therapy for this stuff. So what's the story behind the story? There's a mental health epidemic. There's a number of factors. Obviously, devices, social media play a big part. There's a lot of other reasons. There's just the kind of frenetic, anxious pace of the modern world. There's a lot of doom and gloom scenarios going on at the same time. But, one of the big ones is we have lost our spiritual footing as a species. And again, I'm not talking about religion. I'm not talking about we need to be a member of some particular church, but there are spiritual truths and wisdom that can ground us and make our lives better. And this is one of the pandemics that this can address.
Yeah, and you make a two-sided parallel case, which I enjoyed. One is, hey, a spiritual life is necessary for you to be happy and understand and get excited about your place in the world. One of the lines I loved, which you used, was that our society's become a conspiracy against joy, and that spirituality in its best form can actually lead to your being more joyous every single day. And then the second path you took was, hey, if you want to solve the biggest problems that afflict our species, you need a soul boom or a spiritual awakening, because it will bring people together. And there were a number of quotes you used. I think one was from Albert Einstein saying like a illusion, like the most powerful illusion is that of separation.
Yeah.
And there are all of these foundational principles and values and beliefs you drew in from different faith tones
Yeah.
and traditions. And I loved the fact that you made such a compelling case that, look, this isn't just good for you individually, but this also will help us address any of the big picture issues that a lot of people feel are hopeless.
Yeah, and again, because I am a child of the 70s, I use television analogies to kind of help illustrate this point. And I talk about my two favorite shows from the 70s, Kung Fu and Star Trek. And that Kung Fu is, for those who haven't seen it, because not many have, it's about Kwai Chang Caine, and he comes to America in the cowboy days, and he's fighting kind of evil, racist, aggressive cowboys and looking for his brother. And the spiritual parallel I drew there was that we're all Kwai Chang Caine in our way. Like he is harnessing his wisdom and his training, and he's walking a path. He's seeking to be peaceful as he walks that path, but he's coming up against all kinds of tests and vicissitudes and evil dudes, and occasionally using his martial arts skilled.
One action scene per episode.
Yeah. maybe two, but yeah, you're always waiting for that big ass kicking scene at the end of the episode where he beat up the racist cowboys. But that's our personal individual spiritual path. And maybe we meditate, maybe we pray, maybe we read, spiritual wisdom and traditions. We try and draw on our faith tradition and wisdom of our ancestors moving forward. But the other television show, which I believe is a really, really spiritual show, is Star Trek. People don't think of it as a spiritual show. You think of it
very
as
utopian.
It's utopian. You think about it as like just technology, uber alles. But really, when you really examine it, what has happened on planet Earth that allows humanity to go out in the enterprise and explore space?
What indeed? I have a couple of quotes that you cite from Jean-Luc Picard, and for the record,
look how prepared he is.
Yeah, I'm a next generation guy, so hopefully
I'm an original series guy, but we can get along.
Yes. So people are no longer obsessed with the accumulation of things. We've eliminated hunger, want, the need for possessions. We've grown out of our infancy. Captain Jean-Luc Picard.
Yeah.
And you make a case about capitalism, which I agree with. And one of the pitches I have for you is that we need a new economic system that I call human-centered capitalism that has this monetary-based economy, but also caring and nurturing economy, and then a creativity economy. My case is that AI is going to end up grinding up more and more people with the monetary economy, and that we need to establish like a nurturing and caring economy, and then an arts and creativity economy as quickly as possible.
I love that. And, there's a whole field it's called Trekonomics. It's
Yes.
literally called Trekonomics, which is very much in line in a lot of ways with what you're talking about. But I want to get to that, but let me just finish up the
Please.
Star Trek analogy, which is humanity has peace at home. It has solved racism and income inequality. It has solved environmentalism. And because we've done that as a species, we're then able to boldly go seek out new life and new civilizations on Star Trek, right? And that's what's spiritual about it. Is like, because we have solved those issues, humanity is able to rise to its highest nature, which in Roddenberry's case is exploring the universe and meeting other species and spreading technology and goodness with justice and the rule of law. And interracial kissing, and maybe some interspecies making out too. There was interspecies making out. It was not only the first interracial kiss, it was probably the first interspecies kiss going on. But this is the other aspect of spirituality, and it's very much in line with what you're talking about. I want to come back to that. And that is, we can use spiritual concepts, precepts, ancient faith-based wisdom to help humanity mature and move forward systematically, on a species level, on a societal level. People don't think about they think about spirituality as like, oh, I read this inspiring quote, I light some incense, I go to a yoga class, or maybe I go to church, and I feel better. I feel more serene inside. That's how they think of spirituality. It's kind of, but my point, my ultimate thesis is like, we can have a spiritual revolution, which is very much in line with what you're talking about. But I'd love to hear more details on this kind of like spiritual creative capitalism you're talking about.
Yeah, so you make the case that, look, you have all of these incentives and rewards for big companies and individual actors, and they're leading us toward negative ecological consequences, income inequality.
Yeah.
I mean, the winner-take-all economy is just going to get more and more extreme as technology advances. And I love the universalist case you're making. I'm going to read another quote that I enjoyed. There's obviously many quotes I enjoyed in this book.
Can I just say right here, folks?
Please.
No one has done as much research on a podcast interview, and I've done like 3 dozen, than Andrew Yang. Thank you, Andrew. Really appreciate it.
Well, as an author, you go on a podcast and you can totally tell if someone's read the book.
Yeah, totally.
Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Please do hit like and subscribe and hit that bell if you want to be notified every time a new episode drops. Probably on Mondays, but hit that bell, and thank you. You made this point a little bit earlier, but I want to hit it again. As all the existing organizational systems around us break down, we need answers. We need solutions. We need hope, unity, love, compassion. I think that's exactly what so many people are thinking and feeling right now. They're looking up saying, okay, my faith and confidence in various institutions is deteriorating. What is the answer? And then you look around, and in terms of big picture solutions, in our political system, unfortunately, we're kind of stuck in this binary, what you called like a threat to the future of the country and maybe to the entire planet, which is something I totally agree with.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact
And you've
that,
been in it. You've seen it firsthand.
Oh, yeah. And I'm someone who just thinks that tribalism is going to get us, and unfortunately, people really enjoy tribalism. You make the comparison to sports fandom, which I totally agree with. I mean, I'm a sports fan too, and so like I get it. One of my jokes is like, imagine if you had a sports league with only 2 teams in it.
Yeah.
How would the fans feel about each other over time? They'd fucking hate each other.
Yeah.
Because, by the way, I mean, that's kind of happening. And you're making a universalist case that I unintentionally made when I was running for president. I was talking about universal basic income. I was the magical Asian man from the future saying we should give everyone money. And it turns out that 42% of my supporters weren't Democrats, even though I was running as a Democrat, because there are a lot of people of every walk of life who were like, hey, I kind of like the sound of that. Like that would be a win. And that was somewhat unintentional on my part, though I was very proud of it. Like what's funny is like we're trying to build a tribe of the people who want to bring tribalism down a notch, which itself is fascinating.
A new tribe of many tribes.
Yes, or like a tribe to make it so there's one tribe, which is the human tribe, and that's a very analogous case to the case you're making, though you're making it spiritually. And I've never had the confidence to make a spiritual case. When I've talked to people of different faiths, they would talk about, hey, anti-poverty, yeah, like, my belief system has stuff about that, like, like maybe getting rid of child poverty in the U.S. would be something that transcends party lines.
Yeah.
And that's certainly still a vision I'm grinding away on. There's a tax credit bill that would reduce child poverty by about 500,000 kids that an organization I founded, Humanity Forward, got through the House, which is a miracle in this day and age.
Wow.
And so we're now trying to get it through the Senate. And it's unfortunately being held up by toxic partisanship because a Republican senator didn't want to hand Biden a win during an election year. I mean, it's incredibly infuriating. The problem is that we want all these people to pursue all these humanist behaviors when the market is rewarding anything but. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the case, the example I used to use is that my wife is at home with our son who is autistic. And what does the marketplace value her time at?
Yeah.
And then people think about it and they say 0, and it's like, like she gets a 0, even though we know that's perverse. We know that what she's doing is incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
So the case I was making when I was running for president was, look, let's just provide a base foundational layer for everybody. So our GDP is now up to about 80,000 a head. So could you provide a foundational layer of 12,000 a head to everyone? And people think about it and be like, yeah, like that's actually a pretty reasonable proposition in this. And I say, and then after you do that, you have to incentivize human behaviors that you want.
Right.
Because saying, hey, we hope you do these things when we're going to reward these things, over time will be a bust.
Well, let's parse that out a little bit. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what if we could reward anything, what would it be? It would be creativity. It would
Yes.
be loving kindness.
Yes.
It would be altruistic service to others.
Yes.
It would be people who sacrifice their time and energy and comfort for the well-being of others. It was people who promote positivity in the world, and environmentalists, people who who grow our food and educate our children, who are valued, they should be valued at the highest level, not the lowest level.
Yes.
But instead, we value, what do we value? We value people who are, these days it's kind of those, what are those people called? The jackals that come in and buy companies, and then
You're thinking private equity.
private equity firms that like strip companies of everything, try and maximize profit for short-term gain, then dump them and get out, and then everyone loses their jobs. That is literally that is rewarded the highest in our society.
Your list, love it. People might have other things to add to the list.
Sure.
So let's say you had this $1 trillion foundation and it said, okay, anyone who's doing any of these things, we're going to give you Soul Boom Bucks. It's like, we're going to give you Soul Boom Bucks, and then these Soul Boom Bucks can be redeemed for US dollars at the Bank of Soul Boom, or you can take them to any of these companies and organizations who will completely just accept your Soul Boom Bucks as money. Then everyone would be like, wow, at first they wouldn't believe it, but then they would say, wait a minute, I can actually make Soul Boom Bucks by...
You're realizing there's going to be a lot of jokes at this point in the podcast about Shrute Bucks. Dwight tried to instill his own currency into the office called Shrute Bucks, and they're worth like 1/500th of a dollar or something.
Bring
like
back Shrute Bucks is really what I'm saying.
But keep going, because I love this. Okay.
Yes.
So Soul Boom Bucks.
So Soul Boom Bucks, then some enterprising artists be like, oh, I should take advantage of this before it disappears. So they get in there, and then they wind up having these Soul Boom Bucks, and maybe you have it so that the Soul Boom Bucks you earn are evident in some way. Like, you have like a, dashboard or leaderboard even. And the great thing is, at some point, people would hold balances of Soul Boom Bucks so that you could generate all this activity without necessarily having to cash everyone out at a particular moment in time. One of the problems we have now is that the entire scale of philanthropy is relatively small in the scheme of a $24 trillion economy. Before I ran for president, I ran a nonprofit that I'm very proud of. It's called Venture for America, and I got awards for it. And I took it from 120,000 that I contributed to, let's call it 6 million, sake of argument. And so people look at that and be like, that's amazing. And I'd say, hey, I'm trying to solve problems in a $24 trillion economy, and the biggest nonprofit operates at, let's call it 100 million, sake of argument. There are a few that go beyond that, but sake of argument, that's realistic. And so my plan was for the government to bring together a consortium of foundations and do Shrute Bucks, essentially. and now, look, would there be issues? Of course. But guess what? There are issues with the current monetary system, There's like all sorts of strange. And some people be like, oh, you can't reward good behaviors because the point is to do them without being rewarded. And then I'd say, look, people can still do good things outside of Shrute Bucks or Soul Boom Bucks or whatever it is. But I'm going to guess that a lot of people will end up doing things they wouldn't have done otherwise.
But you also start flexing those muscles, and you start training people to do good, and it feels good. Because guess what? In the field of positive psychology, one of the things, one of the main things that they've found that we talked about mental health, that contributes to greater well-being is being of service to others.
Yes.
This is in 12-step programs. This is in every religious faith that's ever existed on the planet. And it's in the studies of positive psychology. Dr. Arthur Seligman or Arthur Brooks or, Jonathan Haidt, whoever you want to read, doing things We have a society that tells us be as selfish as possible, and that's how you'll feel the best, right? Spend money on yourself, go on trips by yourself, go to Vegas, party, get wasted, have a lot of sex, like do all of this stuff for yourself. That stuff actually, and accrue things, and actually the accrual of things and selfish pursuits makes us less happy. So you're rewarding positive dopamine response mechanisms in the brain that can train you to realize like, if I reach out to others and do things for others, then I'm going to get a payback, a deep, rich, meaningful payback.
Hey all, if you know me, you know I'm not that handy in the kitchen, and I have become a huge believer and booster of Factor. Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals make eating a joy. It's so fast, you just pop that thing 2 minutes later, and you are eating a restaurant-quality, healthy meal, making you feel excellent about yourself. My favorite is the turkey chili with zucchini, and there is so much more to choose from. You never get tired of it. It fits any budget. It's fast, healthy. It is going to be the new Factor in your life. Yes, I'm a fan. Head to factormeals.com/yang50 and use code yang50 to get 50% off your first box and 2 free wellness shots per box while subscription is active. That's code yang50 at factormeals.com/yang50 to get 50% off your first box. Get Factor today. It's going to change the way you eat.
I just want to draw an analogy that I mentioned in the book, and this might be really obvious. It's really simplistic, but it just gets me every single time. Look at political debates. How do they work? Two people, they're fielding these questions from a reporter. Some are softballs, some are a little more pointed. Then what happens? All Wolf Blitzer and everyone gets on the TV, says, who won that debate? The people who win the debate are the people that get the best zingers and insults in on the other person.
Dude, I've been on those debate stages.
Yeah.
And one of the candidates was literally like rehearsing memorized attack lines backstage before we went on.
Yeah.
It was wild. And it really is just a zinger-a-thon.
Yeah.
It was a very, very jarring experience.
But let's pare that down. Do we like it when people do that to us? Like, it's like, let's just go to the golden rule. Do you like it when people like have insulting zingers aimed your way? No, we don't like it. Why are our leaders chosen for their ability to get in insulting zingers on a pre-planned, pre-programmed kind of debate stage? Why is that? Why as a culture, why as a system, are we allowing that to exist?
It's politics as sport. And one of the points you make in the book, which I totally agree with, and I try to explain to my boys who are quite young, that America's economy and political system at this point, and probably social media, unfortunately, is very adversarial and competition-based and almost militaristic.
Okay.
Like I pointed out to my boys, look, what's the most popular sport in America? Football. And like, this is more or less a military sport. When you get there, it's like, take the land.
2 armies. Yep.
The jets will even fly overhead and, the whole thing. And politics has definitely morphed into that. I'm left out the biggest thing, business. Business is all about conquering.
Obliterating the competition.
Yeah, totally. Taking market share, undermining the enemy. It suffuses our culture. And if someone is successful in this economic system, and I have a lot of friends who resemble this, eventually you do reach like, okay, what's the point of all this? You're making a case for just like a completely different operating mode, like a different scale where it's like, look, it's not, hey, who are we going to crush? It's trying to find like an inner spiritual path that actually pushes you to a place that's like beyond that sort of dynamic.
So what do you say? I imagine, I don't know what your listening base is. What do you say to someone listening right now? And you're like, they're rolling their eyes and they're like, give me a fucking break. That's so naive. That's against human nature. The reason we have the systems the way they are is people are naturally aggressive and competitive. The systems simply reflect human nature. You have to take human nature into account. And all this talk about like spiritual transformation and rewarding creativity and hugs instead of debates and, folks getting along and spreading out income and sharing and altruism is a bunch of, it sounds great in theory, Andrew and Rainn, but that's really a bunch of bunk and there's no practical application. How do you respond to that?
What I tried to do in my book, The War on Normal People, is like, look, if you let the current dynamics proceed unchecked, we wind up in a very, very dark dystopian landscape that even if you're at the top of this particular heap, you're going to be fucking miserable.
Peter Thiel is going to be in his underground silo in New Zealand.
And my case is that underground silo is going to suck compared to being able to go to your, nice restaurant in the Bay Area or whatever you want. It's like no one wants to be in the fucking silo. Was my general argument. It's like, look, this is enlightened self-interest. And if we don't do something, we wind up in very, very dark times and places. I'm like a Buckminster Fuller guy where it's, the race between dystopia and utopia is going to come down to the very last minute.
That's great.
There are some things that I see as possibilities.
Yeah.
And
despite Buckminster Fuller, I quote in the book too, like, if you really want to change things, don't tweak the existing system. Make a new system that makes the old system obsolete.
You have to build a new thing. You have to build the new economic system.
And he built geodesic
domes,
Bucks. Yeah.
Geodesic domes, forward party, whatever the heck it is, because the current institutions are going to grind forward and do what they do. They have very entrenched incentive systems and cultures. And then, so if you want to build a new thing, you should build a new thing as opposed to hoping the old thing figures it out, because the old thing's not going to figure it out. the old thing's going to do old thing stuff. And a lot of them are going to make us quite sad. And so we should try and build the new things that make us happy.
So you're saying the answer to my question is like, okay, well, let's ride out the way things are right now and see what happens, because things are going to get pretty effed up. So why not dream big and think big and talk about kind of a generational shift?
It's in your interest, regardless of where you are in this society. Mm-hmm. Like, and one of the things that's very, very common, unfortunately, is like even my very successful friends have kids who are struggling with anxiety and depression and like worried about their place in the world and the rest of it. So look, if even the people at the top of this, like competition, are miserable, something is deeply, deeply wrong. And that this is one of the things too, when someone says, oh, how naive, like blah, blah, blah. It's like, look, if I rewarded arts and creativity at an appropriate level, then we'd see a lot more of it.
Well, this one thing the Europeans have that do really well is they have government subsidized arts organizations.
Yes, at a much higher level.
And we don't really do that here. The National Endowment for the Arts is pitiful and tiny. But we live in a society where people don't see that value, so they would never vote for it. If it came to a national vote, hey, would you want to put in an extra, everyone puts in an extra $10 of tax money just for the arts, it wouldn't pass, I don't think.
So there are all of these things that we should be making possible. My case for it was the freedom dividend / universal basic income, which is like, look, guys, like we're the richest society in the history of the world. We can afford to get the boot off of everyone's throats. So my initial foray did better than I thought it would, honestly, but fell short, clearly. And so then I went to the drawing board and said, okay, what needs to happen for us to actually address poverty in a meaningful way? And so I've got two paths on that. Number one is I have this organization that goes into, it's based on an Onion article I read 18 years ago, which was the American people hire their own lobbyist in D.C. And then there's a guy saying, now they'll take us seriously, like a guy in a suit. And so I hired...
That's hysterical.
So I hired a lobbyist in D.C. and they go around trying to
There's more truth to be found in the Onion than there is in the New York Times anyway, so...
I don't disagree. So
that's amazing. That's such a great headline.
But the funny thing, Rainn, is that they go into these congressional offices and say, hey, guys, we polled it, and your constituents would really like it if child poverty went down. and this goes across red and blue zones. And then the legislators and their policy advisors and their chief of staff or whatever are like, interesting. Wow, I like this. And then they furrow their brows and they're like, "Who the hell do you represent again? like,
Yeah.
why are you in my office to like try to like get poverty down?" Because they're very unused to someone lobbying that doesn't, frankly, have some like giant megabuck corporation behind it. And in this case, it was not a megabuck corporation; it's just some benign philanthropic types who don't like poverty. So that's path one I have, which I'm super proud of. And if you want to see what they're doing, go to humanityforward.com and you can check it out. Doing phenomenal work. Check it out.
Sounds great.
And then the other is this political reform path, which is, look, right now, no one's going to get rewarded. And I know this because they actually halved child poverty in 2021. It went down from 11% to 5%.
Wow.
Because they had an enhanced child tax credit that gave every family, let's call it $300 per month per child. Which ended up having child poverty.
Wow.
And then because of
government can work sometimes.
And then 120 economists signed a letter saying this is the best thing we've done in a generation. And then, of course...
And I've never even heard about it. I read the paper every day. I haven't even heard of it.
Oh, it gets worse, Rainn. And then, because of the dysfunction in Washington, they plunged those 3 million kids back into poverty in 2022. The child poverty rate shot up from 5% to 11% again. Because the child tax credit expired because they said, oh, there's no way we can get rid of this, so let's just let it expire, and then I'm sure we'll renew it. And then things are so fucked up in Washington that they didn't renew it. And so January 15th, 2022, I had these hopes that maybe there'd be some outcry or like outpouring of anger or like sadness that we just shoved all these kids back. Nothing. Not a peep. And it turns out
and those people are the poorest, and the poorest don't have a voice. In a contemporary society, so we're not hearing from them.
Yes, and it broke my heart. It makes me super sad because helping that child tax credit pass in 2020 was my greatest achievement as a human being because like I felt like I helped make a dent in child poverty, and then they unfucking did it, and then so you can imagine how I felt. It's like, okay, I did all this shit and talked to dozens of members of Congress and like dozen senators, all this shit. And by the way, most of them were like, oh yeah, it's a good idea. And then it just fell prey to Washington dysfunction. You're super plugged in and you haven't heard a peep about this stuff. And so we're grinding away on this. So it's Humanity Forward on one side, and then it's trying to reform the political system writ large so that maybe reducing poverty would actually be a winner politically. Because right now, what happens to us and our families, completely irrelevant to the folks in power. We have a 15% approval rating of Congress right now and a 94% incumbent reelection rate. 94%. They can do whatever the fuck they want. Nothing happens to them. And so then they play this game, again, of incentives where it's, hey, can I get on cable news and get some notoriety and some more social media following and then maybe get a list that's bigger so that, because within this system, that's the currency. The currency. Those are the big swings that we should be taking.
So let me, again, big fan of yours. I don't know a whole lot about your various campaigns and policies. I don't know about universal income, but why don't you, here's a suggestion. I'm just going to give you a straight up piece of advice. It's coming from a mediocre sitcom actor, so please take it with a grain of salt. But why not run for the mayor of Newark or New Haven or any of the new cities, New Paltz, and start small and grow like a virus? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if you could win a governorship, but like, and a big city mayor might be out of your reach because of the political machine, but you might be able to win a small town and make some substantial changes and spread it like a virus. So instead of on a national level, you're starting on a local level.
Yeah, there are a bunch of local projects, some of which I'm involved with, that resemble what you're describing. And I'm not even sure you would necessarily need to be like the mayor or the head of that town. Because the fact is, if you become the head of that town, you know what happens is like you would then have like a budget, mouths to feed. And if you were a hero, like there are mayors around the country who've done this, one of whom I met this week, they say, hey, we're going to take this little smidgen and we're going to use this for whatever, like anti-poverty programs. Yeah. And I'm happy to say that those programs are happening. But I'm with you in that we should be doing these things at a local level and establishing
with virality
that they work.
Yeah.
I will say too that like I'm a ground up guy and I'm also like a put the spike in the brain guy. Because I consider myself very practical, and so like I pursue whatever I think is going to work at any moment. But I'm happy to say that there are various grassroots efforts around what you're describing,
Good.
including even some of the parallel currency ideas. This podcast is sponsored by Helix Sleep. I've always been a mattress guy in that I knew if you're going to spend 8 hours doing something, you should probably invest in doing it right. That's why I love Helix Sleep, which will send a mattress to your door that's made just for you. You take the Helix Sleep quiz and you get matched with a mattress based upon whether you want it to be soft, medium, firm, how you sleep, other variables, and then voila, it gets sent to your door and you can try it for up to 100 nights and send it back. They have a 10+ year warranty because they believe in their product so much. I do too. My kids do too. They actually seek out this mattress even though it was designed not for them. That's how good this product is. Helix has been awarded the #1 mattress picked by GQ and Wired magazine. It is even recommended by multiple chiropractors and doctors because they think it'll make you healthier. Don't take my word for it. Helix is offering 20% off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners. Go to helixsleep.com/yang and use code HelixPartner20. This is their best offer yet, and it won't last long. With Helix, better sleep starts now. I just want to give everyone a sense of this. I talked to someone yesterday who graduated from NYU's MFA program after Rainn did. And then he said that a bunch of them went out to Hollywood and met Rainn, and he gave them, an inspirational talk about the industry or whatever, and then helped a bunch of them. Didn't have to, but that I can say that you have an incredible reputation as one of the genuinely good people who helps people even when you don't have to. And you're also a member of the Bahá'í Faith. And I grew up with a lot of people who were Bahá'í. For those of you who don't know about the Bahá'í Faith, you should definitely check it out. I'm going to describe it as something like of a community of generosity. The people that I grew up with were some of the kindest, warmest, friendliest people that I knew growing up. But this is going to be half serious, but I'm genuinely curious. Most of the Baha'is I grew up with were broke. I think it's in part because they were just so giving. Like if they had anything and someone else needed it, they would probably give them the thing.
Yeah.
And so I found myself fascinated by your story in part because obviously your faith is very, very important to you. So I was genuinely curious about whether you feel some kind of, pressure, tension behind being frankly, a very prominent member of your faith.
Yeah, well, there's a lot there that you said. First of all, I want to address the broke Baha'is. I think that it's really interesting because the Baha'is in the United States, I can't speak for around the world, are an amalgam of two very interesting populations. One is kind of like really well-meaning, big-hearted, not hippie, but kind of bohemian-ish Americans, and a lot of whom became Baha'is 60s, 70s, 80s, and then there's a big influx of Persian Baha'is who are refugees because Baha'is are so persecuted by the Muslim government in Iran. So it's an interesting thing going to community meetings and seeing kind of like these kind of hippie-ish, well-meaning bohemian Baha'is that are substitute teachers or teach daycare or plant trees and, raise bees, and then Persian immigrants who are also very spiritual in their own way, but a lot of them have really succeeded in law and business and being physicians and stuff like that. Anyway, that's just a sidebar. It's a funny thing, but I do think that so many Baha'is are poor because they prioritize spiritual things over the material. Not that there's anything wrong with making money or being an entrepreneur. In fact, in the Baha'i Faith, your money that you earn on your own that you haven't inherited is seen as praiseworthy, and job creation and the role that entrepreneurs and physicians and lawyers and and artists can play in helping move humanity forward. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I do feel extra pressure. I've written a book on spirituality. I talk a lot about my faith and spiritual issues, but I always try and keep it, Andrew, where I'm like, I'm not a guru. Like, I'm not any wiser or kinder or better than anyone else. I don't have any answers. I'm just someone that's facilitating a conversation. So I think that's really important. But yeah, sometimes I feel that pressure. Fortunately, there have been some other really well-known Baha'is, some rich Baha'is. There's some couple billionaire Baha'is out there. And Justin Baldoni, the actor, director, he's a Baha'i. Penn Badgley from the show You and Gossip Girl, he's a Baha'i. Andy Grammer, singer-songwriter. There's some other ones coming up, and I hope that their fame eclipses mine.
One of the closing scenes in your book that I just enjoyed the heck out of because it was such a counterpoint to what we're used to was a Baha'i election.
Yes.
And there were a couple of rules. I just want people to imagine this. It's an election where you're not allowed to campaign for yourself.
Right.
And you're not allowed to campaign for someone else.
Correct.
And so
no money can be raised, no yard signs, no campaigning whatsoever.
Yeah. And so you're like, wow, how does this work? And then to the extent you do express something, it's about the qualities that you think the right representative should have. And then it's kind of up to the community to say, like, who has those qualities?
Yeah.
They look around. And so I found myself laughing because this seemed like the opposite of what we're accustomed to.
Now, let me paint a picture for you.
Politics.
Let me paint a picture for you. So this kind of Baha'i election, a spiritual election, that's silent, secret ballot, silent election, no campaigning. It's done prayerfully and with meditation to find the 9 most spiritual, kind of mature leaders of a community. And, silent ballot, secret ballot, elect them. For the international elections that happen every 4 or 5 years in Haifa, Israel, representatives from every country of the world come. And that's, 180 countries, 9 Baha'is from each country in their native dress, sitting in an auditorium quietly, and then one country at a time, they go down with their pieces of paper and put them in a big ballot box to elect the 9 most spiritually mature Baha'is on the planet to be a council that conducts the affairs of the Baha'is. And conversely, and it should be noted that some people criticize that as well, that's a theocracy or something like that. But these 9 Baha'is, that's called the Universal House of Justice, they are paid nothing. They're paid just a subsistence salary, $50,000, $60,000 a year. They're given a Toyota Corolla and a 2-bedroom apartment, and they are selfless servants of the faith. And when they come in the room, you might stand and shake their hand and be respectful, but there's no bowing, there's no kissing the ring. They don't have individually, they have 0 power outside of the council. So if one of the members came to New York and said to everyone in New York City, hey, you need to, juggle oranges every day or something like that, people would be like, that's nonsense, unless that directive comes from the Universal House of Justice itself. But there's images, there's video of this room filled with the diversity and miraculousness of humanity, silently, prayerfully, with meditation and great love and respect, coming down in their native dress, electing these representatives. It's a completely different scene than the American political system and what we're going to go through with Trump and Biden over the next few months.
This podcast is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Why let big tech companies see everything you're doing online when you can just use ExpressVPN and then be footloose and fancy free? Plus, you get access to exclusive content by beaming in to another market. What do I mean? Let's say you have Netflix and you missed the show Snowpiercer. By the way, I loved that movie. And you want to watch the TV series, not available in the US on Netflix, but if you beam into the UK or someplace else,
Then there's Snowpiercer on your Netflix. See how it works? This is a way you can get more from what you're already spending on streamers, plus totally anonymous online, plus you can do it by pushing one button anywhere you are. It's why I love ExpressVPN. It's like a set it and forget it. So be smart. Stop paying full price for streaming services and only getting access to a fraction of their content. Get your money's worth at expressvpn.com/yang. Don't forget to use my link at expressvpn.com/yang to get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free.
And how long do those 9 people stay in those roles?
Like, I forget if it's 4 or 5 years or something like that. Yeah.
And are they allowed to be quote unquote like reelected? Or
they are reelected. Yeah. Most of them retire when they're in their 70s. So there's not like a law about that, but I don't know if on an international level if they're ever like voted out, because we don't really hear their deliberations or anything like that. But on the national level, sometimes other new ones are voted in and people are voted out. Again, zero campaigning. And not to mention the money. How much money is going to be spent on this year's political
$10 billion.
campaign?
2024, the estimates are $10 billion.
So what could we do with $10 billion instead of spending it on an election?
Start a new human-centered economy around, take your pick. We could probably take, caring and nurturing and get a nice head start.
We could solve some problem. We could solve some issue.
When I read that description of that election process, I thought, wow, this seems almost utopian/science fiction.
Yeah.
But it's real. And there was at least one other social scientist who saw it and was blown away and said, like, hey, this is happening, guys. Like, this is it's actually possible.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it almost feels like a scene from like Star Trek.
Yeah.
Like,
that's what it sounds like.
Let's go back to planet Earth, Captain, and the new elections are happening. And look, every tribe and people from the planet are peacefully, quietly, silently putting in their paper ballots for the wise council that shall lead us.
It seems like something out of a Star Trek episode.
But it works, and it works for 7 billion Baha'is on the planet. I mean, 7 million, excuse me, not, wishful thinking. 7 million Baha'is on the planet. It works quite well.
Well, I learned so much from your book. I certainly do recommend it. Made me think bigger about various things. And it picked me up. You're an extraordinarily uplifting human being. And I hope that people dig into what you're putting out there, because it's very profound. And like you said, it's not your stuff necessarily, because what you do is you actually copiously reference and borrow from the wisdom of many others. And I dare say like that's what made the book so compelling and powerful. If people want to keep up with you, support you in your journey, it sounds like you have a podcast coming up.
Yeah, April 9th, Soul Boom, the podcast, is coming out. We've got a lot of great fun interviews. Would love to have you on there.
Done.
Okay, excellent. And it's uplifting, inspiring conversations about the human condition. It's, yes, we touch on spirituality, but a lot of other things too, mental health and wellness, and a lot of laughter along the way. And just follow us at Soul Boom on all the socials, especially Instagram. And I'm similar to you, and it's funny, there are a lot of parallels. I'm trying to start a movement, and
I know it,
where people can look at spiritual. A lot of times, what I say in the book is we've thrown the spiritual baby out with the religious bathwater.
Yep.
So we've thrown out religion because it's corrupt, maybe it's backward, and we don't. It's done a lot of. It's got a lot of hypocrisy in it. Okay, fine. But we've also thrown out so much of what religion gave us.
It was the glue in the community.
Yes.
Has been for most of humanity, for most of history.
Yeah.
And as you reduce it for a lot of folks, and you talk about how spiritual no religion is, the fastest growing group, what replaces it? And I had Arthur Brooks on the podcast, and he said something that scared the shit out of me, but I think was right. He said, you know what's replacing religion? Cable news, politics. And I was like, oh, I groaned. I was like, oh my God, is he right? But I think he is right.
Yeah.
And then there are other kind of secular sectors that have their own religion, more or less. And each of those religions is, I'm going to suggest, not the kind of religion you want to follow. Like I'm thinking of, like there's like an insular culture that takes hold in various places.
Humans are wired to worship something.
We're worshipful.
We are worshipful. We're wired to worship something greater than ourselves. For many people, that can be positive things like their family and a connection with nature. But for a lot of Americans, it's about money and success, or it's about status.
Yep.
It's about being loved more, or it's about...
That's why they call it the almighty dollar.
Yeah, exactly. the almighty dollar, the altar of the dollar, the golden calf, essentially. So how can we reinvigorate our systems with spiritual concepts that are based on compassion, honesty, humility, altruism, and service? And because we've tried the other way. And one thing I love about the younger generation is they're open to these new ideas. Because believe me, people under 30 right now are looking around going like, nothing is fucking working. You know, political system isn't working, economic system isn't working, capitalism isn't working, you know, healthcare isn't working, education isn't working, the list goes on and on. So they're open to new ideas.
Politics isn't working.
Yeah, certainly. And so a lot of them are open to kind of, I can say spiritual ideas. You're talking about kind of philosophical ideas, but whatever it is, it's like, hey, there's billions of us on this planet. We have very limited resources, and we need to share and work together to save ourselves, and we can do it. And that's the message I want to have come across. Like, we have to be hopeful. We cannot sit in the bile of cynicism. We have to believe that we have big connected hearts, and we can work together and make the world a better place.
The opposite of cynicism is joy, and you are a joy spreader, my friend. I love the fact that you took on the biggest struggles and said, look, we need to build a movement out of this mess, and you're totally right. And anything I can do to help, I'm in.
Thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate it. It's been such a pleasure talking with you. I hope we get to continue the conversation.
To be continued at Soul Boom a little bit later in the year.
Yes.
But Rainn, such a pleasure having you on, and to be continued.
Great. Thank you.